If you've read all the books, tried counseling, tried talking, tried not talking, tried praying, journaling, compromising, and anything and everything you can think of, and you still feel like you're bumping into the same painful moments in your marriage, you're not alone. And you're not broken. You're simply missing the one truth almost every traditional approach overlooks. Men and women are different by design. Always have been, always will be. And that's actually a very good thing. Today I'm going to show you why so many couples get stuck despite their best effort, devotion, and good intentions, and why the approaches you've already tried have not delivered the change you long for. Then I'll show you what actually does work so you can begin moving forward with clarity and hope. Hello, my friends. I'm Dr. Debi, longtime university professor, former clinical psychologist, and now your professional marriage educator and revolutionary couples coach. For more than 25 years, I've helped men and women understand each other in a way that finally makes sense. Not through blame, not through pathology, and not through complicated therapeutic models, but through design. Because once you understand why the two of you keep repeating the same painful pattern, you can finally stop fighting those dynamics and begin transforming them. Today's episode is especially for couples who feel like they've already tried everything, the ones who've put in the effort, who've reached out for each other even when it was hard, who've sat in counseling offices hoping something would finally click, and who still feel stuck. If that's you, or anyone you love, this episode could be a turning point. The first question most couples ask, usually quietly, is, "We've tried everything. Why isn't anything changing?" It's not because the two of you are incompatible. It's not because you don't care enough. And it's definitely not because you're too late. The real reason is much simpler. Most marriage help is not designed for a man and a woman trying to solve a pattern together. Traditional counseling relies heavily on the therapy model for the individual. It works beautiful for personal healing, trauma work, and mental health support. But when two people walk into that room together, the individual model breaks down because a man and a woman don't express emotion the same way. A man and a woman do not communicate the same way. A man and a woman do not seek connection in the same way. A man and a woman do not feel safe and secure in the same way. And none of that is a flaw. They are actually different from one another by design. But when counseling treats both partners the same, it inadvertently ignores one design. Usually it's the man's. So the couple leaves with more emotions stirred up, but fewer tools and even fewer results, which leads to exhaustion, discouragement, and that sinking feeling. We've done everything we know to do. Why isn't this working? Because your counselor was using an approach that wasn't built for what the two of you actually needed. Let's talk about husbands for a moment, because this is an area where so many wives carry unnecessary confusion and frustration. Here's why men pull back and why those men are not wrong in doing that. When a man hesitates to try counseling or avoids emotional conversations, his wife often interprets that hesitance as disinterest, stubbornness, pride, or unwillingness to change. But after thousands of sessions with men, here's what I've learned. Men avoid counseling for very good reasons. Reasons grounded in their gender design, not in selfishness. He avoids shame, not responsibility. Boys learn by kindergarten the unspoken rules of masculinity. And rule number 1, don't be weak. Now imagine what it feels like for a man to sit in a room with two women, his wife and a counselor, talking about emotional pain he has learned not to talk about. To him, that's not connection, it's exposure. He's not trying to avoid responsibility, he's avoiding shame. And shame shuts men down faster than anything else. He expects to be misunderstood because he has been before. And whatever he shares can become a tool in his wife's arsenal, because that has also happened before. Most counseling models ask a man to identify his feelings, articulate them clearly, stay with emotional intensity, express vulnerability, all while the one he loves is expressing her pain. But men don't process through words first. They process through their physiology, through silent processing and taking action. So he walks into a system that's not user-friendly for him, and he's expected to play a game where he doesn't understand the rules. He's not resisting connection, he's resisting an emotional setup that feels impossible to win. He doesn't want to make things worse. Now, this is the part wives rarely hear because husbands rarely say it out loud. But I've heard it privately over and over. I stopped talking because every time I try to explain, it just makes matters worse. He's not withdrawing out of apathy. He's withdrawing out of frustration and potentially more hurt, not only for himself, but for her. That's his gender design, not distance. Why do wives feel more alone after counseling? Yeah, let's talk about the wife's perspective. She usually enters counseling with hope. She walks in thinking, finally, someone who can get him to listen. Finally, he'll understand how much this matters. Finally, he will change. So when the session ends and nothing changes, or he shuts down even more, the heartbreak is immense. Because to her, talking equals connection. Emotional expression equals engagement. Understanding equals healing. When that doesn't happen, she concludes something must be wrong with her husband. But nothing is wrong with either of them. Something is wrong with the approach. Most counselors never explain why he withdraws, why she intensifies, why his silence isn't indifference, why her urgency isn't attack, why they keep repeating the same patterns over and over, increasing their pain. When a woman doesn't understand the why, she fills in the silence with fear. Maybe this really is hopeless. Maybe he doesn't love me anymore. And that fear adds pressure, which adds urgency, which adds more misunderstanding. Not because she's wrong, but because she hasn't been given the right framework to organize the details. There are 3 mistakes I've seen in traditional couples counseling that unintentionally create more harm than good. Not intentionally, not maliciously. It's simply because counselor training doesn't teach counselors about male-female dynamics. Mistake number 1, the counselor picks a side, even unintentionally. If the counselor resonates more with her emotional expression or sees him as less engaged, then she often is seen as the injured one, and he is seen as the problem. A man senses that immediately, and once he concludes he's already lost the game, he emotionally checks out of the room. She feels his shift deeply and interprets it as indifference. But it's not indifference, it's defeat. Mistake number 2, the counselor just lets the couple argue. The couple sits down, tension rises, voices escalate, and the counselor watches. Maybe she nods, maybe she takes notes. Then the session ends with, well, that's all the time we have for today. That's not healing. That's rehashing. You could replay your worst pattern at home, and you do, for free. Mistake number 3, the counselor offers empathy, not guidance. Now, empathy is wonderful, but empathy without direction keeps couples stuck. Couples need structure, clarity, definition, direction, emotional safety, and a clear path forward. Without that, they walk out of the session more intensely aware of the problem, but less equipped to solve it. Awareness without tools is defeating. Awareness without direction is overwhelming. And they both feel it. This brings us to the revolutionary marriage approach, what I've spent more than 25 years developing, refining, and watching transform couples who have felt hopeless for far too long. It's not therapy. It's not analysis. It's not who's right and who's wrong. It's education, plus clarity, plus design understanding, plus direction, plus practical steps forward. Here's what makes it radically effective. Principle number 1, men and women are different by design. Once a couple understands how he processes emotions, how she processes emotions, why one withdraws, why the other leans in, how safety feels different for each, how connection is sought differently, then everything starts to make some sense. There's nothing wrong with him and there's nothing wrong with her. They're simply operating from different emotional operating systems. Principle number 2, safety always comes before skill. No amount of communication skill building will work if one person is in defense mode. When he feels safe, he softens. He stays present. He listens. He becomes generous. He reconnects. When she feels safe, she relaxes. Her anxiety quiets. Her warmth returns. She stops pushing. She becomes influential instead of urgent. Safety is not a feeling, it's a requirement. Principle number 3, no one gets blamed. Both get understood. Instead of asking who's causing this, we ask, what pattern is happening between the two of you? And how do your gender differences play into it? Blame shuts both of them down. Understanding opens both of them up. Principle number 4, couples need a picture of where they're going. Most counseling focuses on what's wrong. Revolutionary marriage focuses on what partnership looks like, what emotional safety looks like, what connection looks like, what synergy feels like, what one flesh means from a practical standpoint, what extraordinary marriage means for this unique man and woman. When couples can see the destination, they can walk toward it. Principle number 5, couples need steps, clear, simple, specific. Transformation doesn't come from venting, it comes from understanding, language, direction, doable steps, and consistent support. When the steps make sense, the marriage begins to change, and sometimes very quickly. Let me share a story. This is a composite of many real couples I worked with over the years, but we'll call them Jim and Laura. Jim is steady, loyal, hardworking, and devoted to his family. Laura is warm, thoughtful, intuitive, and deeply committed to their marriage. But when conflict arose, Laura tried to talk through it. Jim became quiet. The more she tried to understand, the less he talked. And the quieter he became, the harder she tried. Not because she was angry, but because it was too important to ignore. And not because he didn't care, but because anything he said seemed to make it worse. Now, this was the pattern they couldn't escape. They tried traditional counseling. Laura shared her pain, and Jim went silent. At one point, Laura told me this about a past counselor. He just sat there while I cried and Jim shut down. Then he told us our time was up. Nothing changed. It actually made things worse. And Jim told me, I wasn't trying to avoid her. I just didn't know what to say without making her angry or hurting her feelings. I couldn't win. Not a lack of love, a lack of understanding. on all sides, including the counselors. The revolutionary shift? Well, when Jim and Laura understood their design differences, Laura began to realize that his silence wasn't dismissal. It was something else entirely, and she started to learn the nuances of her husband's responses. Jim began to realize that her urgency wasn't meant as an attack, it was her bid for connection. She softened her approach. He began looking forward to working on their dynamics together, and their pattern shifted quickly. One day, Laura told me, "I feel like the wonderful man I married is back." And Jim said, "Something that finally works. It's like you just gave us the missing piece. Why has no one ever told me this before?" There is another problem here, though. When one partner won't join, or won't join yet, in fact, a question I hear constantly is, what if my mate won't participate? Or what if my mate doesn't want to work on it right now? Well, here's the truth. One person can change the pattern, not through pressure and not through persuasion, and certainly not through pleading, but through new understanding, new emotional cues, new responses, new timing, new language, new influence. Yes, even with different gender designs, men and women are both created to respond deeply to the emotional signals of the one they love. When one person changes the pattern, the entire relationship changes. And yes, men often become more open, more engaged, and more hopeful when the emotional environment shifts. So, what do you look for in support that actually works? Well, if a couple seeks help outside themselves, and many do, here are 3 things that matter far more than degrees or techniques. Number 1, someone who sees each partner in a more positive light than they see one another. This builds a sense of hope, and hope is oxygen. Number 2, someone who can paint a picture of a healthy partnership, clearly and compassionately. Couples rise when the destination is clear. Number 3, someone who could guide them step by step from where they are to where they long to be. No wandering around, no guessing, no emotional whiplash, just clarity, direction, and support. The most important thing I want you to know is that your mate is not too fragile, and you are not too late, and you are not incompatible. You're simply underinformed. Not unintelligent, underinformed. Once you understand your unique gender designs, both his and hers, everything begins to make sense. And once it makes sense, everything becomes possible. When his strength and her beauty interact in a context of understanding and acceptance, that's where synergy happens. That's where the connection grows. That's where extraordinary marriage begins. If today's episode opened something inside you, if something clicked, if something finally made sense, take the next simple step. Download your free guide at revolutionarymarriagecoaching.com. You'll learn the foundational design differences that explain everything you've been struggling with and everything you've been longing for. Because extraordinary marriage never happens by accident. It's the natural result of his strength interacting with her beauty to create synergy and life.